history of sex and love is also a history of power, of politics, of religion. But it's been buried, hidden, falsified. That's why a journey through the history of sex and love is so full of surprises. Well, it was for me anyway. Why did Roman gentlemen prefer blondes? Would you hang one of these on your car windscreen? And was it really the hats that made medieval knights so sexy? Were cornflakes invented to stop us masturbating? Above all, just how did we end up here? Another question I want to ask is this. How come our society invented sexual repression on a spectacular scale, and yet we've ended up surrounded by images of eroticism? Shh. Let's go back as far as we can in human history. When most of us look at ancient Egypt, we see astonishing works of engineering. So it came as a bit of a surprise to me to learn that these pyramids and temples were all built in the context of cosmic sexual activity. Sex was how the gods kept the world alive. Indeed, it's how it all started. Atum, the creator god, is said to have masturbated to form the world. I suppose you could call it the Big Bang Egyptian style. And masturbation kept a sense of the divine. At the festival of the god Min, who represented Pharaoh's sexual potency, men masturbated in public. Well, then was then and now is now. I'm here in Luxor with Dr. Joanne Fletcher, who has studied male-female relationships in ancient Egypt. And she believes that there then existed a surprising degree of equality between men and women.
There was no kind of idea that women were the weaker sex or passive at all, because the whole mythology of ancient Egypt, the whole ethos was based on a complete balance of opposites, a complete balance of dualities, male and female, night and day, life and death. Women had exactly the same rights in the eyes of the law that men did. Women could buy and sell property, choose which of their children would inherit. They could divorce their husbands.
The sexual intercourse of the gods was what made the world fertile, filled it with sexual energy, which of course affected the way men and women looked at each other throughout the ancient world, even in ancient Israel. The belief that human sexuality mirrors divine behavior, it's what the gods do, it's how they keep the world alive, makes it impossible for sex to be immoral or shameful.
All night long on my bed I longed for my beloved. I longed for him, but he never appeared.
This is the Bible, the Song of Songs. It belongs to a literary tradition that dates back 5,000 years.
I will arise and look all around throughout the town and throughout the streets and squares.
And it's still sung by Orthodox Jews on a Friday night. The Song of Songs seems a pretty surprising thing to find in the Bible. It puts the joy of sexual love at the very heart of Judaism, just the same as the old pagan religions.
These love poems go back in ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia to a much earlier period, perhaps 2,000 or 3,000 years earlier. Originally, these were songs told about the love affairs of the gods. And then people, imitating the gods, of course, began to celebrate their own love in the same way.
But how could the God of the Old Testament have a love affair if there was only one God?
The official version of Israelite religion in the Hebrew Bible is that there was only one God, and that this God was male. But there are shadowy representations of a female deity who was, first of all, condemned and gradually forgotten. Her name was probably Asherah. She was the great mother goddess of Canaan before Israelite times, and she was borrowed into Israelite religion.
Well, this is Mrs. God.
This is Mrs. God?
Yes, this is one form of Mrs. God. In a figurine form. We can see that her main attribute is her life-giving breast milk and life-giving force.
So the early Israelites worshipped a fertility cult, and their religion celebrated sex, the sexual act.
Yes, very much so.
So what happened to the divine couple? Why did Mrs. God get written out of the story?
Well, Mrs. God didn't even get divorced. She sort of got forcibly removed and denied existence.
The Bible itself records the destruction of Asherah in Jerusalem around 650 BC. This happened at a time when the whole of the Near East had been taken over by the Assyrian Empire. Jerusalem was holding out alone against impossible odds, and the temple priests decided that any gods with foreign connections had to be thrown out. So Mrs. God, Asherah, an imported goddess from Canaan, bit the dust. Most scholars think that it's around this time that the book of Genesis was written, and that put woman firmly in her place. The emphasis was no longer on woman as life-bringer, but as man's downfall, bringer of trouble and death. And it introduced something else as well: shame of the body. The two of them were naked, Adam and the woman, and they were not ashamed, until they ate the fruit that gave them understanding of good and evil, and then they knew that nakedness was wrong, and they were ashamed. We don't know exactly when Eve was invented, but she belongs to a new age of warfare, the Iron Age. War itself had changed as iron weapons had appeared. Rulers were now less concerned with guaranteeing fertility than with military supremacy. Men had taken over and filled their universe with gods and heroes, and the same thing was happening in Greece. Everything was about masculine power. Even in the practice of sex, it was still a man's world. This is Thebes, the city of Oedipus. In ancient times, it was guarded by a crack fighting force, the Sacred Band of Thebes. The Sacred Band was remarkable because they were trained never to surrender, but to fight until the death. Another remarkable thing about the Sacred Band of Thebes was that they were all homosexuals. In fact, you couldn't join the band unless you were one, and you brought your lover with you. But the Sacred Band was not invincible. In 338 BC, they were overcome by the superior forces of Philip of Macedon and his son, Alexander the Great. The band fought as they'd been trained, to the death. And Philip was so moved by their bravery that he wept over their dead bodies and built this monument in their memory. It's a monument to love between men and valor. The Greek philosopher Plutarch wrote, "The lovers and the beloved, ashamed to be cowardly in each other's eyes, willingly rush into danger to protect one another." Nowadays, we draw a distinction between macho and gay, as if a man's sexual behavior somehow defined his strength, endurance, and courage. But the ancients didn't make any such assumptions. In 1879, this whole area was excavated, and the remains of 127 pairs of lovers were discovered carefully buried in this ground. In ancient Greece, love and sex were totally separate. Greek men shut their wives up in domestic respectability and demanded sex from slaves, courtesans, and boys. As the Greek Empire declined, the Roman ascended, and in Roman eyes, the Greeks were effeminate. Masculinity dominated the Roman world even more than the Greek. This is Pompeii. Rick Jones is showing me some of the usual sights.
What's this up here, though?
It's fairly obvious what it is. It's an erect penis with a pair of testicles.
Now, what would that be? What would it be there for? Is it telling you it's a brothel, or?
These are seen as signs of good luck and fertility. But clearly there's likely to be some sexual association with it too. And bars, like modern pubs, have their moments of this sort of thing as well. And we also know that we're here near the gate here, there's tombs outside the gate. there is literary records that say that prostitutes would maybe get picked up in bars and would practice their trade outside in the tombs.
Would the Romans walking past on these streets, would they have been shocked by seeing this?
No, because these are all over the place, and it's a different sort of sensibility. People are looking in different ways, and we would nowadays find that difficult, I think, in polite society. But in Roman society, this was normal because of things like the fertility aspect of it, but also a different attitude to sex.
The Roman state took an interest in its citizens' sex lives. The first emperor, Augustus, wanted to breed pure Roman citizens, so he encouraged all Roman men to marry Italian women and rear families. The trouble is, when you make something a duty, you take some of the fun out of it. Italian women were dark and civilized. But what about those slave girls? Untamed, blonde barbarians, weren't they more fun? For whatever reason, Roman men decided that blonde meant sexy, and women from prostitutes to stately matrons were soon dyeing their hair or wearing wigs, even Augustus's own daughter.
When erotic objects from the ancient past were first discovered, they were hidden away in sealed collections that only now are just being opened up to the public. One of them is here in Naples in the National Museum, and it's the Gabinetto Segreto, or the secret chamber.
The majority of these objects were discovered in the remains of Pompeii and Herculaneum, and they weren't hidden away. They were found everywhere, in hallways, dining rooms, on street corners, in bars, and even as garden ornaments.
Susan, I'm rather glad you're here with me, because I think this is the kind of thing I wouldn't like to be caught looking at on my own. Now, can you explain something about what this piece is?
It was found in 1752 in a garden in Herculaneum. It was basically a garden ornament.
Well, I mean, that's not why. I mean, it is rather shocking, isn't it? I mean, it's a man fornicating with a goat in glorious marble colour.
This is the god Pan, who is a goat-like god who would go around doing this kind of thing. It's an appropriate thing for the god Pan to do. He's a god of the countryside, so I suppose it's an appropriate thing to have in a garden.
I think for me what's interesting is that for the modern eye, you can't get over the shock. You think, oh my God, put it away, hide it, don't let anybody see it. But for the Romans, obviously, they were unfazed enough to be able to see it as a work of humour, because that's what it is. It's a work of great humour. It's such a lovely thing. I mean, like, it's so funny. I mean, the expression on the God's face is very sympathetic. He's going, oh, you're such a nice goat. You know, he's holding a little beer. Oh, nice goat. Yeah. And the goat's looking a little bit coy. And I don't know whether maybe that leg is the goat fending him off.
Well, yes, there had been resistance, but there is no longer. Yes.
I'm sure goats don't do it like that, you know.
Oh, I'm afraid I wouldn't know that. That's where my expertise ends.
In the Greek world, the ideal of love was something quite separate from sex. At the same time, sex was nothing to be ashamed of, and the body was something to be celebrated. The Jews, on the other hand, had started to believe that it's right and natural to be ashamed of your naked flesh. And eventually, of course, the classical and Jewish worlds come together. Hello, Christianity. The history of sex and love was about to be totally transformed. The pagan world saw the business of fertility, sex, and the renewal of life as the vital connection between the gods and man. Christianity, in the early days, presented itself as anti-paganism. So being anti-fertility and anti-sex wasn't an accident. It was fundamental to Christianity. This is the Greek city of Corinth. It's a quiet place now, but a couple of thousand years ago, when it was part of the Roman Empire, it had quite a reputation. When Greeks referred to a prostitute, they called her a Corinthian girl. And one expression for a pimp was a Corinthian businessman. She's a Corinthian meant, oh, she'll go with anyone. Up on that mountain was a temple to Aphrodite. And here, in this lively port city, Aphrodite's temple was dedicated to the pursuit of sexual love. It was said that there were 1,000 temple prostitutes hard at work here. After the crucifixion, Jesus' disciple Paul set out to teach the world the importance of what he understood to be Christ's message. And this is what he wrote in his letter to the Corinthians. Neither fornicators, nor adulterers, nor the effeminate, nor homosexuals shall inherit the kingdom of God. This is what St. Paul told the people here in Corinth. In the history of sex and love, St. Paul holds a very special place. He was both a Jew and a Roman citizen who grew up in a Greek city. He set out to interpret the message of the Jew Jesus to the Romano-Greek world, and a large part of that message, as he interpreted it, was that unmarried sex was not only shameful, but a sin. To the unmarried and the widows I say that it is well for them to remain single, as I do. But if they have no self-control, let them marry, for it is better to marry than to burn.